The next crisis will not knock before it enters, and shelves will empty faster than you think. When that moment comes, it is not hunger that breaks people first, it is the realization that they have no control. Most will rush to the store too late, but those who prepare now, today, will have something far more valuable than food: time. Time to stay calm, time to make choices, time to protect the people they love. In recent weeks, we've talked about shelters, bunkers, and emergency strategies. All of them are essential pieces of preparedness. But the truth is that none of them can truly work if one simple and vital element is missing: food. Because if a crisis forces you to stay home for weeks, a bunker without supplies won't help you. And at the same time, a pantry full of food without a secure shelter can become useless. Real preparedness is a system, and every part must work together. Today, we focus on the part most people overlook: the home food reserve. This isn't about stacking cans or filling shelves. It's about buying yourself time, autonomy, and the power to choose when the world outside slows down or stops. Before we build your ultimate checklist, we need to understand why this step is more urgent now than it has ever been. And if you're worried about being unprepared for the next shock, subscribe to the channel. Here we build solutions, not illusions. Most people don't prepare because they assume something will always be on the shelves. But that belief is weaker today than it has been in decades. Armed conflicts are disrupting global trade routes, forcing exporters to cut shipments of essentials like wheat and rice, and driving up costs for fertilizers that crops depend on. Climate patterns are becoming more unpredictable, with droughts in key agricultural regions of North America and floods in parts of Asia destroying millions of tons of harvests. At the same time, inflation is eroding food reserves as governments struggle to stabilize prices, and supply chains that once stretched smoothly across continents now break under geopolitical pressure. These aren't distant scenarios. They are already reshaping how food moves and who gets it first. In a world where a single conflict, drought, or blockade can ripple through the global market in days, just a few weeks of disruption are enough to turn a supermarket into an empty aisle. And when that happens, the problem is bigger than hunger. It's the sudden loss of control, the panic of being fully dependent on systems you don't control, and the realization that your choices shrink the moment the supply stops. Your pantry, then, isn't a luxury. It's a buffer. It's the time you buy yourself to stay calm, make smart decisions, and adapt when the world outside starts shaking. If you want to see how fragile the system really is, don't take my word for it. Check official reports from the USDA, the World Food Program, or the FAO. Their forecasts make one thing clear: the pressure on global food supply isn't a theory, it's already here. Understanding why food security matters is only the first step. The next is learning how to turn that awareness into something real. A system that doesn't just fill space in your pantry, but actively protects your life when the outside world stops working. Because building a food stockpile isn't about filling shelves with whatever you can find. It's about building a system, one that sustains you, stabilizes you, and buys you the most valuable resource in any crisis: time. A proper reserve has 4 missions. It must nourish your body with enough calories and nutrients to keep you strong. It must protect your health with safe, shelf-stable foods that won't spoil or expose you to illness. It must maintain your energy and morale, because eating well under stress isn't just a physical need, it's a psychological anchor. And above all, it must give you time to avoid desperate decisions, time to adapt, and time to let the situation stabilize without forcing you into dangerous choices. This is why a pantry isn't an isolated project. It doesn't exist on its own. It works together with the water you store, the cooking systems you prepare, and the shelter you rely on. Think of it as the heart of your preparedness network, the piece that keeps everything else functioning when the world around you slows down or stops. A shelf full of random cans might last a week. A carefully built stockpile can sustain your independence for months, and that difference can decide whether you're reacting to a crisis or riding it out on your terms. If the logic of a stockpile is to buy you time, The most critical stretch of that time is the first 2 weeks. That window, the first 14 days, is where most disruptions either resolve themselves or spiral into something far worse. And it's also the period when supply chains, emergency services, and even neighbors are least likely to help you. In that scenario, your goal isn't luxury, it's continuity. You need to sustain life, keep your body strong, and maintain a sense of normalcy without relying on anything outside your own walls. To do that, you don't need hundreds of products, just a carefully chosen foundation. Every effective 14-day stockpile is built around 4 pillars. The first is energy, calorie-dense staples like rice, oats, or pasta that can serve as the backbone of multiple meals and store for years without refrigeration. The second is protein, shelf-stable sources like dried beans, lentils, canned tuna, or chicken that keep muscles functioning and support immune defenses. The third is fat, often overlooked but vital because it's what fuels long-term energy and makes meals satisfying. Simple options like cooking oil, ghee, or nut butters serve that role perfectly. Then there's the fourth pillar, micronutrients and morale. Salt, spices, vitamin supplements, even a small stash of comfort foods like coffee or chocolate may seem trivial, but they preserve routine and psychological stability, 2 things that become increasingly valuable as days stretch on. To make this more tangible, let's build a quick example. Imagine a household of 2 adults planning for 14 days. A practical baseline might include around 10 kilograms of rice or pasta for staple calories, 4 to 5 kilograms of dry beans or lentils, 10 to 12 cans of protein such as tuna or chicken, 2 large bottles of cooking oil, a small box of multivitamins, and a few sealed jars of peanut butter or nuts. Add a handful of shelf-stable extras, salt, spices, instant coffee, maybe a bar or 2 of chocolate, and you now have a system capable of delivering roughly 2,000 calories per person per day for 2 full weeks. This is not a prescription, but a starting point, a reference you can adjust based on dietary needs, household size, and budget. Precision matters here. Knowing the approximate daily caloric and nutritional needs of each person in your household lets you calculate quantities more accurately and avoid waste or shortages. And because this 2-week period is about resilience, not survival in the wilderness, you should also think in terms of meals, not just ingredients. Build combinations you'd actually eat. Test them. Rotate them into regular use so that nothing goes stale, including your habits. When the world pauses, the last thing you want is to be experimenting under pressure. Instead, you want a pantry that feels like second nature, a system that runs itself so you can focus on what matters most, staying calm, conserving energy, and watching the situation unfold from a position of strength. If the first 14 days are about endurance, everything beyond them is about resilience. It's the difference between waiting out a disruption and living through a long-term crisis on your own terms. And the way you approach it changes. The goal is no longer just to meet your basic needs, but to sustain a stable, predictable life for weeks, even months, without external support. That requires shifting your thinking from stockpile to system. Instead of simply adding more food, you now start building layers that work together: volume, preservation, and support. The first layer is scale. Extending your stockpile from 2 weeks to 30, 60, or even 90 days doesn't happen overnight, and it shouldn't. The smartest approach is incremental. Each grocery trip, add a little extra of the core staples you already rely on, focusing on shelf life and versatility. Grains, legumes, canned proteins, oils, and preserved fruits or vegetables all scale well and are easy to rotate into regular use. Over time, these small additions build a deep reserve without overwhelming your space or your budget. The second layer is preservation. Once your stockpile grows beyond a few weeks, proper storage becomes as important as the food itself. Temperature, light, moisture, and pests are the 4 enemies of long-term reserves, and controlling them dramatically extends shelf life. A cool, dark, dry space is ideal, but even simple steps, Airtight containers, oxygen absorbers, or vacuum sealing can transform how long your food remains usable. And remember, rotation isn't just a best practice, it's a necessity. First in, first out. Keep track of dates and cycle older stock into your regular meals before replacing it with fresh supplies. This keeps your pantry functional and prevents expensive waste. The third layer is integration. Food alone is not resilience. To truly function independently for 30, 60, or 90 days, your stockpile must connect with other systems. That means storing water, at least 1 gallon per person per day, and planning how you'll cook if the grid goes down. A small propane stove, a solar cooker, or even a simple wood-burning setup can ensure that your carefully stored food is actually usable when you need it. And if you rely heavily on canned goods, think through what happens when your can opener breaks. Redundancy in tools and fuel isn't paranoia, it's planning. All these layers work toward one central goal: extending your autonomy. Every additional week of supplies you add, every container you seal properly, every piece of equipment you test and verify, stretches the time you can make decisions on your timeline instead of someone else's. And in a long disruption, whether caused by a natural disaster, a cyber attack, or a geopolitical crisis, that time is freedom. It's the space you need to adapt, to plan your next step, and to avoid the desperate decisions that people without options are forced to make. But building a stockpile isn't just about adding more, it's also about avoiding the mistakes that silently undermine everything you've done so far. And this is where many preppers, especially beginners, fail. They focus so much on quantity that they forget about strategy. They fill shelves with anything that's non-perishable, assuming that more equals safer. But more isn't always better. Sometimes it's just wasted space, wasted money, and false confidence. The first and most common mistake is buying what you don't eat. It's easy to think, I'll eat anything in an emergency. But reality is different. In a stressful situation, unfamiliar or unappealing food doesn't just lower morale, it increases waste, because you'll avoid using it until you have no choice. The smarter approach is simple. Store what you already eat. Just store more of it. That ensures you're rotating your stock naturally, and that everything in your pantry will be used whether a crisis comes or not. Another classic error is ignoring expiration dates. Even long-lasting foods have limits, and relying on something that's spoiled or degraded can turn a solution into a new problem. The key is rotation, the first in, first out principle. Place newer items behind older ones, integrate them into your regular meals, and replace them as you go. This keeps your stock fresh, functional, and familiar. A third mistake is sacrificing variety for volume. A pantry filled only with rice and beans might technically keep you alive, but it won't sustain you well. Your body needs a balance of macronutrients and micronutrients, and your mind needs comfort and familiarity to stay resilient, including spices, sauces, and even a few luxury items you enjoy. Isn't indulgence, it's psychological preparedness. It turns your stockpile from a last resort survival stash into a livable food system. Finally, many people build their stockpile once and forget about it, treating preparedness like a one-time project instead of a living process. But your needs, tastes, and household size change over time, and so should your reserves. A quarterly audit is enough. Check quantities, swap expired items, update your list, and adjust to any new circumstances. The golden rule is this: stockpiling isn't about collecting things you might use one day. It's about strategically storing what you already use, in a way that guarantees nothing goes to waste and everything works when it matters. Done right, your pantry won't feel like an emergency bunker. It will feel like an extension of your daily life, ready to support you when the ordinary becomes extraordinary. But even the most well-planned stockpile is incomplete if it ignores one invisible but powerful layer: psychology. Food isn't just fuel, it's comfort, stability, and a reminder of normal life when everything around you feels uncertain. In a long crisis, that matters more than most people realize. A spoonful of familiar flavors, the smell of your favorite coffee, a simple piece of chocolate, these aren't luxuries, they're anchors. They help maintain morale, reduce stress, and keep decision-making clear when pressure builds. That's why a resilient pantry should always include small pieces of normalcy, a few comfort foods, the spices you use every day, maybe a treat you'd reach for on a difficult day. They don't take up much space, but their impact is enormous, because survival isn't just about calories. It's about staying human when the world stops feeling that way. Stockpiling is the foundation, but true resilience begins when you move beyond storage and start producing. Even small steps, a few square feet of garden, a tray of sprouting seeds on a windowsill, or learning basic food preservation techniques can dramatically reduce your dependence on the system around you. You don't need to grow everything you eat. What matters is building a loop that replenishes instead of constantly depleting. Every tomato you grow, every jar you preserve is a piece of control you take back. And if this idea of producing rather than just storing speaks to you, let me know in the comments. We might dedicate an entire video to building a practical, home-based food system from the ground up. Building resilience doesn't end once your shelves are full. In fact, that's when the real work begins. A stockpile isn't a static stash. It's a living system that needs care and attention over time. The best way to keep it reliable is to test it. Run occasional drills where you rely only on what you've stored for a few days and see what runs out too quickly or what you forgot. Create a simple monthly checklist to review expiration dates, track changing family needs, and rotate supplies before they expire. These small habits turn a pile of food into a dependable safety net, one you can trust when you need it most. In the end, stockpiling food isn't really about cans, calories, or expiration dates. It's about reclaiming one of the most powerful forms of freedom we still have, the freedom to choose our actions instead of being forced into them. A well-built pantry buys you time to think clearly, to act deliberately, and to stay calm when others panic. It turns a crisis from something that happens to you into something you're already prepared for. And that mindset, the ability to stay one step ahead, is the foundation of every other layer of resilience you'll ever build. Because the truth is, preparation doesn't end with food, it starts there. So, how many weeks of real autonomy do you have right now? Share it in the comments, and keep strengthening your resilience with us, one deliberate choice at a time.